Welcome to today's episode of me reviewing various highlights. It's been a while since I have been on, I was going to say on air, but that's not quite true, right? It's been a while since my last recording, and it's been a busy week. I'm sure things are just going to get busier going forward for at least another month and a half. But I try to make it a point to at least get to this recording today. So let's get started. And yeah, we're starting with the molecule of Mo. Both circuits give us the capacity to consider phantoms, things that don't physically exist. For desired dopamine, those phantoms are things we wish to have but don't have right now. Things we want in the future. For controlled dopamine, the phantoms are the building blocks of imagination and creative thought. Ideas, plans, theories, abstract concepts such as mathematics and beauty, and worlds yet to be. I think this is one of those factual highlights. There's not much to reflect over here. There are the book talks about two different kind of dopamine circuits. One is the desired dopamine circuit, which is the common thing that we associate when we hear the word dopamine. That's the circuit that drives desire. For example, uh, addiction. For example, right? Where you have an intense desire to just have more and more of something. Dopamine drives that, right? And the other one that the book talks about is the control dopamine, and this is a circuit which kind of drives future planning, which drives that instinct in ourselves where we want to control things, control our fate, control our future, and control the environment around us. So yeah, it's like I said, it's more factual. Moving on. 4,000 weeks. The more you focus on using time well, the more each day begins to feel like something you have to get through, en route to some calmer, better, more fulfilling point in the future, which never actually arrives. The problem is one of instrumentalization. To use time, by definition, is to treat it instrumentally, as a means to end. The book repeatedly makes this suggestion that our time can be too much our own. Our need to control time to the minutest second, even millisecond. That desire is great for machines, when we are working with machines, but when we are working with human beings, it backfires on us. A whole host of health problems, physical and mental health both. So this particular highlight, it kind of reinforces that when we try to focus on using time well, on optimizing on our every second of our day, the each day our relationship with time, our relationship with our actions becomes very instrumental. And that's what happens. We are using time as a means to an end. And I think it's going to be much more elaborate if I try to explain what the book offers as an alternative over here, because it's really about the perspective of time, of the 4,000 weeks, and the notion that you don't have to control time to that, your time or your activities to that extent. A lot of different highlights that we have covered in this book beforehand. So yeah, I think I should just leave it at that. Moving on, extreme ownership. Accomplishing the strategic mission is the highest priority. Team members, departments, and supporting assets must always cover and move, help each other, work together, and support each other to win. This principle is integral for any team to achieve victory. So the book is talking about one strategy, like it's mentioned over here, called cover and move. So when there are two teams working towards one goal, and the teams are moving in this pattern, cover and move. Like one team is covering while the other team is moving, and then they switch roles. This is, of course, it's driven from the military setting of cover and move. But the point here is accomplishing the strategic mission. So when one team is covering, it may seem like that, okay, they're not doing anything productive towards the outcome, but they are. It's very obvious. If you imagine a military outcome, it is very, very obvious that cover and move is a valid strategy, but it's not that apparent in another setting, in a non-military setting. And in engineering, for example, software engineering, this is sometimes it's often called glue work. Or recently I read another metaphor for this called white space in a job description. Things that are not mentioned in the job description but are actually necessary for the job to be successful. So again, the point of this highlight is the strategic mission. Achieving that is the highest priority, and teams work together to achieve that. And this principle is integral for any team to achieve victory, like the highlight says. Moving on, it's again extreme ownership. While a simple statement, the commander's intent is actually the most important part of the brief. When understood by everyone involved in the execution of the plan, it guides each decision and action on the ground. This highlight is essentially talking about simplicity and the simplicity in commander's intent. So if there are, for example, a book is obviously it's a military, it has a military background, it's a military setting, and when a strategic objective it's being conveyed to multiple teams, right from the highest levels of command to to the teams that are on the ground or in the field. There must be one commander's intent that actually sets the vision, the purpose, and of course it's challenging to come up with one intent that works for all teams. That's the challenge. And it's often said simple is not hard, simple is not easy. It is actually quite hard to come get to simple, but that's the aim over here, having a simple commander's intent that every team can relate to. And of course each team's leadership, they are going to elaborate on the commander's intent, but ultimately commander's intent should be simple enough that everybody can remember when they're in the field, when they're working on things, and when they don't have time to think about anything else that might happen, when like more complicated thoughts can't kick in. That's when simple words, they kick in. You can remember those, and then that will kind of reinforce why you're there, the strategic need for your presence, like the one why you're in that particular place at that particular time, and that will guide decisions. So in a way it is very similar to values and principles, but values and principles are, they're not transient. Commander's intent may change with one mission to another, but values and principles are a different thing. But the notion is that values and principles are again simple, hard, but still simple. Whereas commander's intent is also simple, but it can change with mission to mission. Moving on, the earned life. Do you love him? Is a basic question. So is who's your customer, and will this work? And can we afford this? And where did we go wrong? And are you serious? What are you running away from? Is basic. So is what are you running towards? Any question simply phrased that demands a deep, soulful examination of the facts and your abilities and intentions, that is, that elicits the hard truth, qualifies as a basic question. Um, Underlying this highlight is the notion again that basic questions, or we just talked about simplicity. That is hard, and that is hard because it forces you to dig deep. The why of the whys. Why are you doing something? Like, will this work? It's not a simple. It's not an easy yes or no answer. It is simple, like you eventually want to get to yes or no. It is simple in that way, but it's not easy to get to that. Can we afford this? It's not easy to get to that. It forces deep examination, like the highlight says, deep and soulful examination. So it kind of like carries over from the previous highlight, about simplicity. Moving on, kill it with fire. The hard problems around legacy modernization are not technical problems, they are people problems. The technology is usually pretty straightforward. Keeping people focused and motivated through the months or years it takes to finish the job is hard. To do this, you need to provide significant value right away, as soon as possible, so that you overcome people's natural skepticism and get them to buy in. Yes. So, the yeah, I'm sorry about that distraction. I forgot to turn off the phone today. Anyway, coming back to this, the Yeah, I think anybody in a senior enough position in a technology project knows this, that technology is usually pretty straightforward. Seniority usually means that you're dealing now with people problems, people management. Keeping people focused and motivated through the months or years it takes to finish the job is hard. Modernization problems, so many software problems, software teams, they are very long living. It sometimes it takes years. It's very typical for it to take months, but it's also very possible that it takes years. And keeping people focused and motivated throughout their entire time, it's very hard. Finish the you know Finishing the job is hard. So yeah, the follow up, to do this you need to provide significant value right away, and that's a constant problem in people management, right? So yeah, that's about it. Moving on. 7.5 lessons about the brain. The real story is that during the course of evolution, certain genes mutated to cause particular stages of brain development to run for longer or shorter times, producing a brain with proportionally bigger or small parts. Okay, so this is describing how the brain developed different parts, and it's also goes along with the like the concept that or with the fact that brain is not like a collection of different regions that work completely autonomously. Um, there was a earlier highlight that kind of described this better, where the where it describes, for example, it describes the hub and spoke model, of how there is a good analogy. It's still an analogy. It's not like the perfect model of brain, but it's an analogy of how airports are connected throughout the world. So there are hubs and then there are smaller airports. So if you want to go from one small airport to another place, you might actually connect through a hub. Most likely, you will connect through a hub. So if you're going from I can't think of a small airport right now, but yeah, if you're going from that's weird. I can't think of a small airport right now. But because all the nearby airports are quite major for me. Anyway, yeah. So you get the picture. So similarly, brain connects to different like the different parts of brain are connected in that particular way, hub and spoke model, and also they're all involved in a particular task. So even though it is easy to think of brains in different regions like visual cortex and auditory cortex, it's not that clear cut. And this is also this particular highlight that we're talking about right now. It also goes along, it's in that same section where it's talking about how different regions of brain developed in different times, and so that's why it's just like some regions are proportionally bigger compared to others. Let's move on. The earned life. When we're able to disengage from our previous selves, letting go of all the patterns from our past to create a new self becomes as easy as turning off the lights when we leave a room. The book kind of begins with this notion of a our past self is different from us. That there was like me, Hussein, in the past is not the same Hussein I am right now. Not from yesterday, not from 1 hour back, not from my previous breath. Each moment, it's a different learning. And, like for example, I forgot to switch off my phone. It's a small mistake. Um, but that mistake was made by my past self. And the idea is that each moment we are disconnecting from our past self, and now we are talking about we are going to be present focused, and we're going to talk about uh, you know who am I right now. So there is a lot of discussion in the book. Like I said, it's kind of a central theme of this book, letting go of our past selves. And this highlight talks about that. When we're actually able to do that, to disengage our previous self, letting go of our patterns from the past. So the mistakes that we have made, that it should not remain a pattern. We are breaking the pattern. It becomes easy when we realize that okay, that's a past self, and even each moment I'm reinventing myself. So if a mistake is made by past Hussein, me, the present Hussein, I'm just going to, I have that as a learning. And it's very easy for me to break the pattern because it's not me who made the mistake, it's the past Hussein. It it seems very easy when I put it like that. Of course, the book goes into a lot more depth, and I recommend reading this book. It's a very good one. Moving on, the leader's greatest return. As you develop leaders, you need to learn what motivates them and tap into that motivation. Focus first on what motivates them the most, but also inspire them in every area you can. Help them discover their purpose, give them as much autonomy as you can, build strong relationships with them, and help them to foster good relationships with others. Provide them with opportunities and resources to grow, encourage and incentivize them to strive towards mastery of their skills, praise them and reward them financially. It's a summary of different things, like in terms of developing leaders. Also, it maps very very closely to the drives model, the mastery, autonomy, and purpose. Really, growth and everything that relates to mastery. Autonomy is mentioned straight away, and motivation that maps to purpose. So, yeah, I think the model of remembering just these three things: mastery, autonomy, and purpose is kind of this is an elaborate version of that same thing. So let's move on. Drive came to me because there is a webinar going on at work about drive. So it was the first thing that popped in my head when I read this. Anyway, let's move on to measure what matters. People who plan have to have the guts, honesty, and discipline to drop projects as well as to initiate them. To shake their heads no as well as to smile yes. We must realize and act on the realization that if we try to focus on everything, we focus on nothing. Well, I mean, it's kind of like I don't have much to say because I was frankly blown away by the last sentence over here. It kind of maps with the what we talked about in like the how the our time is not really our own and everything in the previous highlight, like little earlier in 4,000 weeks. It's very very close to that. And it's a problem that I'm actually dealing with right now, trying to focus on trying to focus on everything. And ultimately that's what happened. That's what's happening with me right now. It's a present challenge I'm dealing with, focusing on that. I ultimately focus on nothing. So yeah, this is also applicable to setting OKRs. This book is all about OKRs, right? So it's also very very applicable to that. What are you saying yes to, what are you saying no to? And OKRs are all about focus. You're going to have a few OKRs and they define the focus areas very very what's the word, uh, very specifically. I'm I'm not able to find that word. So it's very important that when setting the OKRs, you find the focus areas and let the OKR drive. In other words, stick to those areas of focus. Don't aim to focus on everything. And that brings us to the end. And this is actually today's much longer, but I'm also kind of speaking slower. I'm dealing with a throat issue as well. But anyway, that's the end of the video today. It's almost 18 minutes. If you're watching until now, thank you.